Today, I am so honored to be joined by Amy Griffin. Amy is the founder and managing partner of G9 Ventures, which invests in basically everything that I'm wearing at this human moment. It's like every brand you know and love and probably use all the time, like Bobby or Bumble, or I'm wearing an Aura ring right now, or Spanx. And the thing is, Amy is not just like impressive and accomplished. She is one of the kindest and most ridiculously generous people I've ever met. She loves to champion other women, and it is written all over her and all through her story. Her new memoir is searing in its honesty and its courage. It's called The Tell, and I am so excited to talk with her about it today. Amy, what an absolute gift to see your gorgeous face here.
Oh, what a gift that was, Kate. Thank you so much. This is the highlight of my day, of my month, of my year, to see your smile. How can I not see your smile? I loved you from the minute I met you.
Oh, hon, you too. I feel exactly that way.
But what is that line in Steel Magnolias where it says, I love you more than my luggage, Blanche? Right? Is that what it is?
That's good.
I loved you more than my luggage.
I think there's one of the things you name immediately, which I felt like you named this familiar thing in me, was you named this ridiculously strange ache that we all feel that I see so often in women, but it's this kind of relentless churn. Like I'm in motion, I'm helping, I'm loving, I'm caring, but I'm also like working constantly. Don't you see all these plates I'm spinning? Please don't look at all these plates. And I wondered how that started to manifest itself in your life.
You know, there was just this constant running, that there was this nagging that I felt, where I kind of looked around at all the other moms as I was in a drop off and somebody had a snotty nose and I was picking up a lunchbox and I was running off to a meeting and then to a board meeting, but I wanted to pretend like I had all my plates spinning perfectly.
Yeah.
And I started looking around wondering, is everybody else dropping the ball in many of the ways that I am? And is it okay to talk about it?
Yeah.
And even that was kind of scary to think about. Are we allowed to talk about the fact that it's really hard to hold all the plates and keep them all spinning
Yes.
at one time?
Yes.
And for me, I think it was this constant nagging of not being honest with myself about my past that in some ways was, it's like you're running and it was catching up with me.
Yeah.
And it was the time that it finally, it came to me where I realized it was harder not to tell. It was harder to be still.
I see.
Stillness was hard.
Yeah. There are these very aggressive cultural scripts that we don't sometimes realize that we're living to a T. And one that sounds like it was particularly, almost painful for you was this story about perfection. Like Amy is the perfect one. Amy has it together.
In my case, it was this idea that people sometimes would say it to me, or my children would say, we don't know how, you're perfect, Mom, you do everything right.
Yeah.
But this idea that when enough times it was said to me, I would look over my shoulder because I had been looking over to think, you know what? I've been building up all these castles around me, this idea of what perfection really looks like. And, perfect is just not going to happen, but good enough is perfect.
Yes.
Good enough. It just is perfect. Like where you are in this moment. And I think that was for me, the most important moment in my life when I finally sat down and said, Amy, you're perfect just as you were before all of this happened.
Yes.
And you're perfect just the way you were whenever you were a child and you did cartwheels and you were free. And that was that cartwheel question is really that idea of perfection. And when did we stop doing cartwheels as children? When did we stop having that just joy, pure joy for life, where everything didn't have to be just so? Yeah. And so I really, we talked about starting the book at the beginning, but in a way, I really retraced my life to find that moment when I stopped doing cartwheels.
It sounds like your daughters have been a big part of you I guess like our kids reflect back to us who we kind of a step beyond who we think we are, and then just tell us who they think we are. And it sounds like Gigi said something especially helpful and maybe painful in your discoveries.
Yes. And, what's fascinating, and I'm thinking about it now, both my girls they're my teachers. They're my greatest teachers. They're the greatest reflection of myself in moments when maybe I didn't want to listen. And in the moment, Gigi says to me, Mom, I don't know you. Who are you? And you're perfect. I can't be perfect. And there's that word again. There's that word again. And I was sad. There was a door slammed, which there aren't a lot of doors slammed in our house.
I might have gone to like, excuse me, have I not built you a universe in which I have not let you suffer?
I did. I said that. I think it was something along the lines of, I do everything for you. I set up everything for you. I plan every activity for you. I take you to school every day. I make, I get you ready for breakfast, get you breakfast. But that wasn't what they were saying to me.
I see.
They were saying, I want you to show up in our life and pay attention in a different way that is not about the doing, but the being.
Yes.
There's a lot of pivotal moments that I write about that I kind of have only been able to backtrack on now and realize how I'm finally being honest with myself and connecting the dots as to what happened in the past.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that door slam. I'm really grateful for it.
I mean, it's especially hard when like there's a person we want to be. Like in that case, I want to be the kind of mom that does everything and makes sure you're okay and also cares about you. But like at the same time, there's these parts of ourselves that we don't always know, we don't always have access to. And you were very curious and very brave in the way that you approached this. You heard about this form of therapy that was gaining traction. It's called psychedelic-assisted therapy. And you decided to be very curious about it, where other people might be like hesitant or judgmental. And I just wondered like what initially drew you to it, and just if you could just describe it for me.
I think I'm one of the most boring people on the planet. My friends will be like, Amy's going to order a margarita tonight. Like we put it in the text chat. She's going to have a margarita. Like everybody plan your night around it as if it's the big news. And I don't like alcohol. I was an athlete growing up. I'm very, very square.
So for you to be like, of all the people that we know, Amy would be interested.
People are like, what? There was this knowing. There was this deep knowing that I really needed to be honest about my life. And so there's so many factors that I think really led me to explore psychedelic assisted therapy. One was that my girls were also of the ages that I was when my trauma experiences happened. So I'm told that is quite common, that, it would be bringing up these feelings in me. And I think that's where the girls felt it. Two, I had and have an incredible spouse, and I had a 20-year marriage under my belt where I had this safety level that I couldn't have recreated in any relationship. It would just, it had been built up over 20 years. And then this ability to sit with someone, when I sat with someone I was able to work with whenever I used psychedelic assisted therapy, to know that I felt safe and to know that there was space for me to make space for myself to go in and have this help. And so for me, it is crazy to me that my story does involve psychedelic assisted therapy and the use of MDMA, but I actually only look at that as a very small piece of how I was able to open myself up. And it was really this permission that I like to talk about, the idea that because I was someone who was not a drug user or had not, for recreational use, I think this was like the ultimate permission for myself to say, I deserve to unlock this. I deserve to have compassion for myself. And that's what I did when I went in to have the experience. And what was so fascinating for me, which is what I also talk about as people experience, they're hearing my story, is I don't have a lot of experience with it. And I wasn't looking for, I didn't go in looking. I did say, the woman I was working with that morning, I know I have a lot of trauma from my childhood. sexual in nature, even saying the word sexual in nature, I could barely say it. But she said, well, let's go find out. This is your day. This is your
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
It was this permission that I trusted myself enough. And whether, my psychiatrist always says all the time, Amy, I would bet on it. This had nothing to do with the fact that you took the pill, because it was within 5 minutes. And I said, I raised my hands. I'm ready I need to tell you all these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet just that ability to swallow the pill and move forward and say, this is what I'm going to do for myself. And then, I spent 8 hours in that first session of just, telling for the first time, telling my story. And like you said, it was like I opened a door and walked into a home.
It was almost like it was fully furnished with all these memories.
I was just going to say fully furnished. And I had lived there for my entire life, and every corner of the house I knew intimately. And it was as if I was inviting my parents and my husband into this house that I knew so well. The other way I like to describe it, which relates to a house, is you imagine that you walk down the street and you're walking down the street. We always walk down the street on one side of the street. And then, you know all the trees on that side of the street, and you know where the deli is, and you know who lives next door. And then one day you decide, and in this moment of me deciding to take ownership of my story, I decided to cross the street.
Yes.
And walk down the street a different way, and then look at my house, look back at it and think, oh, wow, there's a whole new way of looking at this.
Yeah.
And it was like a puzzle above my head that just came together, and this honesty of this all happened. And it was so freeing. It was so liberating. Kate, I can't go back. Like, it was, I've been asked many times, would you ever take it back? Do you wish you didn't know? Well, the truth is, I always knew. I always knew. And until I told myself in that moment, and then until I brought my husband into the room and said, I have to tell you something. I have to tell you this.
And how did you start that sentence, Amy? If you've never said it before, like, how did you say it?
I have to tell you something. No matter how much it hurts you, no matter how much it hurts me, I'm going to tell you something. And so in that moment, when I told John what happened to me, it was wildly liberating, free, honest. I can even say, in the depths of the greatest pain in my entire life, it was joyful, which,
I totally believe that. I totally believe that there is like because you can't be joyful at the same time that you are sad, but you can be joyful in the exact moment of like a kind of sorrowful release, and like and just finding the truth, like coming to the truth of what's happened to you, and being able to trust that all the words you say are the really real. Like there's like a standing to full height.
Yeah. And you probably know this too. Do you have those moments where, there were nights, horrible nights, where I literally slept on the floor in the closet? Like there were, when I just couldn't function. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. There were these moments, but somehow, do you have those moments where I look back and I think of when my husband would come and cover me with a blanket, or a friend would come over and say, put on your shoes right now, we're going to Starbucks. And so I remember those moments of connectedness, and somehow I don't miss being that low, but I miss that connection of like real human connection.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to that point, but you ever have that where now you get back in the busyness of life and
when you're in the worst moment, and there's like the beauty of that intimacy where you even though you're devastated, you're loved, you're known, and you know what's real, like what's important. There's like a sorting, I think.
You're seen.
Yes.
There's like a scene, like I've never felt more seen before in my life. The idea was the telling was another relationship for every person I told. And every person I told, it was a little easier to tell my story. And frankly, to look someone in the eye and see that they could take your story and that they believed you, it wasn't
Hmm.
trauma dumping. I think it was this idea that if someone was truly in your life and they could make the space for this,
Yeah.
then they were really going to be in your life
Yes.
for forever.
Yes. I totally believe that. There's such a that's such a good distinction too, because there's the people who tell you like they're just dropping an anvil, and then there's the people who tell you like they're giving you a gift. Like this is the really this is what this is a part of everything. Like I'll never forget a nurse that sat down beside me when I was in chemo, and she said, "I meant to tell you, but I had a son." And just the way she said "had," it was just because she knew I was scared. She knew I was so worried that I wouldn't have a certain future, that all my dreams would come away. And for her to just to give me the gift of the end of one of her dreams, it really felt like when people tell you the truth with the right person, it really does feel like a gift. Did you worry a lot about how people, I mean, would see you? Like, I guess partly just as, I don't know, sometimes there's parts where you just, there's a seamlessness, you know, it's like you don't want to crack it. Even if what you're saying they would understand, like sometimes it's hard to want to even let people know that there's sort of a tear in the fabric of the universe.
Well, I think I was living that way for such a long time. I think we all do. I don't know when we crack that
Yeah.
egg to recognize that it's okay. But what's so interesting to me is once I really cracked the egg and I said, this all went down, I have a lot of childhood trauma, childhood abuse um, from a teacher. But that's not what the story is. The story is the vulnerability of the telling, not even what happened to me. And I think that one of the main takeaways I have for me was this idea that I thought that secrets would keep me safe, controlled, measured, and really they keep us stuck. When you do tell, this vulnerability is so much more powerful.
Yeah.
That permission to tell and connect with another person that creates this incredible bond,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that you've been through, is the antidote. And I feel like there's literally like a chunk of my brain that has been reprogrammed back in,
Yes.
like a whole new section of my brain, which says I can be more connected. I don't have up the guardrail rails. I can also put boundaries up for myself, and that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm more joyful. I think, ask my kids, they may say I harp on them still about their homework, but I don't anymore. I don't. They already have enough pressure on them. I'm not going to talk to them about their homework because that is not where I'm going to create a relationship with them.
Something you said about that moment of discovery, but it's kind of like this terrible fever where you're realizing something and you've got this, it sort of consumes everything. It,
Mm-hmm.
it reminded me of my friend Nikki Grimes. She's a poet, and she wrote about that very strange relationship that trauma has with memory. And she had this description that I thought you'd absolutely love. I saved it for you. She calls trauma a memory hog. She says it gobbles up all available space in the brain, leaves little room to mark daily happenstances or even routine injuries, which are less than life threatening. Like it has, I thought that sounded exactly right, that there's a sorting that memory does, and some things are in crystalline detail, and other things, even if they were probably important at the time, just you forget entirely. And it sounds like a lot of this memory work you've done, it sounds too like it was a kind of grace.
Kate, that's so right. I don't think of this story as a story that is about my trauma. It's this sort of tapestry that I built of the relationships
Mm-hmm.
from how I sorted out everything that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not going to throw out the fact that I am competitive and athletic and confident and ambitious and a leader. I love that Southern part of me, that community mindedness that I got from living in a small community where everyone took care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to throw that out.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are other parts of me that are people pleasing, care about what everyone thinks, want to make sure everyone's taken care of in the room before I get a drink or use the bathroom. And I can
Yes.
get rid of some of those now.
Yeah. there's the going through the terrible thing. And then there's just all the accidental wounds that happen when other people find out.
Mm.
And you're very honest about there were not always like easy responses that people had. Some people responded by being like, I'm trying to think of another description than like patriarchal, but like trying to take over again and not allow you to stay in the driver's seat of situations and imagine you need to be taken care of. Or other people, I mean, really just sort of found a way to make it about them and their response. I think many of us, by the time we're done with a problem, actually look around and we find that we either have some new friends along the way or we have a different relationship with the people that we do have in our lives. I wonder if you have any advice for people who either want to be a good friend, or how might we advise people who are like untangling a complicated past?
I came to realize that I have a multitude of friends who, in all different ways, gave me what they could give me in that moment, which also really helped me understand as to why they were in my life. For the most part, almost everyone I've talked to, I can now have a poignant answer for why that person is in my life, and they showed up the best that they could in that moment. There are many times now when I talk to someone or I realize that in that reaction that someone else had, oh, that I'm stepping into what their problem was, their trauma.
Yeah.
I can now see it, and I realize they can't even get out of their own experience to be helpful to me or to engage with me. And that's totally okay. But because I know who I am and I know what happened to me, all that I can do is be authentic and honest. And that I can't do anymore.
That's right. Or less. Like, I like that of just being like, well, but my authenticity still has to be the bottom line.
You know, the going to tell my parents what occurred, I thought would be the worst day of my life. And then I thought it'd be the worst day of my life to go and tell my children. And in reality, they were some of the best, hardest memories I'll ever have in my life in terms of reactions. But my life was all the better for the telling, for the sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to a lot of people over the years who have like a dot 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 at the end of their story where there's not a tidy ending, there's not a clean ending. You spent a really long time dealing with the fact that this case fell outside of the statute of limitations in Texas. You couldn't pursue a criminal case. And yet the telling still remained like the gift you wanted to give yourself. Like there's a no matter whatness to what you're doing. I guess that's just what I wanted to ask you about.
It's such a good question. And it goes along with the telling in that the achiever side of me thought that, well, if I could just prove this outwardly so that such that others would then believe me because there was I held this person accountable. Plus, every fiber in my being wanted to make sure, first and foremost, this person wasn't doing this to anyone else again.
Yeah.
And that I could help other people so this wasn't happening. I don't know that I realized it till I look back, but I wasn't even really present in my own healing because I was trying to do so much at one time and manage, the phone calls to make sure I held this person accountable from a legal perspective. And then I would go and do, go for a long walk or talk to a therapist or do whatever it was I was trying to do on that front. And I realized, you know what, like the greatest gift I could give myself was to let that go and recognize that actually wasn't going to do anything. I don't think it was going to do anything anyway. And the realization that I would really want to spend all this time in a Texas courtroom away from my family, it was like, is it that important to you that you prove this, that you build up that castle so that everyone sees that? And, I like just beat myself up over it endlessly over this idea that how can you let this go? Because then you're not going to have that perfect outcome. You're not going to tie this up with a bow. And talk about compassion for myself to say, it's okay. I'm letting it go. I'm choosing me over it.
I like that. Where you're like that young self that should have been protected, that grown-up self that still has this beautiful life to live, that like explorer self that always wants to make sure that she can grow and things don't hold her back. Like in all those versions, you're finding a way to move forward, even when an almost impossible reality could like threaten to make that impossible. So that sounds really like that's the difference between like knowing something and then the hard road of wisdom. It's really lovely. There's this quote by the poet Adrienne Rich that means a lot to you. And it sounded,
Yeah.
when you wrote it, I felt you in my core. It goes, there must be those among whom we can sit down and weep and still be counted as warriors. And you describing that kind of like deep belief in yourself and also just like deep desire to carry what you have to and move forward. I just think you are a joy, a champion, and a warrior. And I feel really honored to have had this conversation today, my love.
Oh, Kate, I could go on for ages in talking to you because you are the exact type of conversation I want to have that helps me move forward in the telling again. And I just hope, as I saw through the writing, the twists and turns of the story, that it helps one person who then goes and finds that person in their life that can listen and that they can look them in the eye and say, I'm telling you, I need you for this reason. And I may not need you to do anything, but I just need you to hear me. I just need you to hear me. And so I'm really grateful for these conversations. I'm grateful for you. I'm just grateful for who you are as a person. I'm grateful for the fact that when I met you the very first time in person, that my nervous system dropped like 40 notches, which I think is the highest compliment someone can give someone. For every part of who you are. I'm a little bit miffed around the idea that you're a Duke professor with my UVA background, but I'm going to forgive you for that. So I'll forgive you for that. But I am a Wahoo. I want to state that for the record, through and through.
I really love your description of wanting to, like everybody needs the person they can come say, I really need to tell you something. You're the person that I genuinely immediately believed is the person I can go to if I said, no, I don't actually, I'm scared I can't fix this. Because you said, it was like 1 second into knowing you, and I was going through a difficult situation, and you were like, hey, just so you know, you're wanted here. And I thought that was like, when I'm scared, I feel like the too muchness means I don't belong. So you gave me back the feeling that I will be wanted even in my mess. And so thank you for the fact that you're just the kind of person who wants to backstop somebody else in their terrible moment. And I can see it all over you.